Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Southern Outdoorsman Podcast, coming at you today with another Q&A episode. We're getting back to Q&As now that turkey season's kind of over with. Don't have really anything exciting from our last couple hunts to share with y'all, so kind of closed out the season on a good note with everyone killing some birds. We covered that on an episode a couple weeks back. Also, today we're going to be giving away an orange hat and sticker pack. We're going to be reading iTunes reviews at the end of this podcast, or Apple Podcasts, whatever they call it these days. We're going to be reading those at the end of the podcast, picking our favorite one, and sending you an orange hat. So that's going to be awesome.
Blaze Orange Lucky Hat.
Lucky hat comes pre-made with luck woven right into the fabric.
Yeah.
Jacob, how are you doing?
Doing well. Doing real well. Again, we just got back from the Eco Wild Expo, so still kind of recovering. I'm not going to lie. Anytime you go to one of those shows, it's like, I love to talk, but I'll come back and I'm like, I'm talked out. Like, I got back in the truck and I was thinking about calling somebody just because I was bored. But I'm like, I don't know if I want to talk right now. I've talked enough for 3 days. So.
Yeah, it was a really fun show, man. I'm glad that we went down to it. Mobile is an awesome area. Definitely a unique part of the South that we don't cover enough. I'll just throw it out there. We don't cover it enough.
Yeah, we got to see some alligators or an alligator.
I saw 2. You only saw 1. I saw one when we were driving down the highway.
And it was a stick in the water.
No, it wasn't. God almighty.
It's a little driftwood.
But so we interviewed some listeners that stopped by the booth at Eco Wild. So those are going to be going up sometime in the next couple weeks. Don't really have a timeline on it yet, but I'd like to get them out sometime in May. We also recorded a live podcast there that y'all are going to get to hear soon as well. Don't know if we're going to do it as a bonus episode or a Monday episode yet. I got to go through it and see what we talked about. But anyways, yeah, it was a great time, man. So shout out to everyone who came by the booth, who bought hats, sold a whole bunch of hats, got to talk to a bunch of you guys. Had an absolutely awesome time. Jacob, you have any other takeaways from it?
Man, no, but it kind of kicks off the I guess the show season for us because next we get the Mobile Hunters Expo at the end of June in Dalton, Georgia, which is going to be an awesome show. Then we have the World Deer Expo in Birmingham, which I keep forgetting. What month is that? July? Or
July.
Okay, July. Yeah, so I'm super excited
so
for that
June,
show.
we got the Mobile Hunters Expo in Dalton, Georgia. July, we have the World Deer Expo in Birmingham, Alabama. And I don't think we have another one after that, do we? We got a bunch of people asking us to go to different trade shows around the country. Like the Dixie Deer Classic is one of them we get requested to do quite a bit. So if you've got a show that you recommend us going to, whether it's a Dixie Deer Classic or another one, write in and let us know.
Yeah, we ought to do a poll for real on that because I would be interested in adding maybe one more show going into 2025 that we do, just based off, where people would want to see us at and, come hang out. Because one thing, so we had some really good feedback from listeners at the Eco Wild Expos where, people were coming up, listeners come up talking to us and they're like, man, I feel like I know you. Like, because I've listened to you for, however many hundreds, if not thousands of hours.
Yeah.
And it's like cool to hang out. And I'm like, I agree. Like, I like going just to be able to meet you guys and meet a bunch of listeners and kind of figure out like what's worked for you, what's not working for you, how the show has helped you or maybe second guess everything else that you've done in the past. So it makes it for some really fun conversations. And that's one reason I enjoy really going to those shows. But anyway, it was awesome. But, kind of getting back in the swing of things. We've got a couple other real big interviews that we got lined up a little bit later on the month. Patreon members, exactly kind of, what we have going on. If you want more information on that. And also, by the way, I'm talking about like this future big guests we're going to have on. You can go over and join Patreon, patreon.com/Southern Outdoorsman. But also today, this Thursday, when you are hearing this, if you're listening to this Thursday morning, tonight, we have our second Hunters meetup, or Hunters hangout session on Patreon. We're going to be doing our bi-weekly Zoom calls as well, kind of talking a little bit more about this future guest that we've got coming on the podcast and getting some specific questions written in by Patreon members that we're going to be able to ask this specific guest. It was just going to turn out to be hopefully like a 4-part series episode. So we got that coming up. Feel free, again, you can join Patreon, again, patreon.com/The Southern Outdoorsman. Join that. Come hang out with us on the Hunters Hangout, again, every other Thursday at 7 p.m., which is a pretty fun time. So we did our first one 2 weeks ago, and it was fun. It was a blast. But other than that, Andrew, how do you want to kick everything off?
So it was good to have Pike back on the show this past Monday. It was interesting conversation as always. I haven't really asked him. We've hung out with him a little bit like throughout deer season, but I hadn't really asked him about, getting back into the swing of things after being burned out on deer hunting. And I don't know, there's a lot of interesting subjects in there, but one of them that I think I want to hit on is the whole not overextending yourself or building a plan for the upcoming deer season. And the reason I want to talk about it is I just feel like it's a good subject for right now. A lot of people are kind of getting out of turkey season. We're going into summer, so you're either applying for points in states you want to go to, or maybe you're looking at some states that you might potentially visit. Maybe you want to go on a bear hunt. Maybe you want to go on a deer hunt somewhere, hit up a Midwestern state. Maybe you're just looking at some other WMAs or national forests or whatever within your state. Whatever the case may be, I just think it's a good time to have that discussion right now. And one thing that we talked about with Pike is, we've done a lot of different things over the years, but one thing that we were all really bad about is doing just little weekend trips here and there. And I guess the good part of it was we were able to hunt a whole bunch of different areas, in Tennessee, for me, Georgia. I've hunted Georgia a good bit. And then also just like a bunch of WMAs around Alabama too. And it was good to have that experience, but like you never kill anything. I mean, like very, very rarely did we have success. I mean, we might kill a doe every once in a while, might have a buck encounter, but it was usually like kind of a one-off, almost accidental encounter.
Or miss one. There's one WMA that we've hunted, which we haven't hunted in a few years now because of hunting pressure, but you and me went there probably 6 years ago, and I missed a really nice buck with my bow when he thought I shot at a doe.
Oh, yeah.
And that was one of those short trips that we went down for. But
well, kinda. That was actually, I was going there every weekend, and then I talked you into coming down. You might have been living in Nashville at the time, were you? Or
probably, I don't know. It was around that time frame.
Because me and Mark Turner were hunting that particular WMA pretty much every weekend after like December, and I think it was the weekend maybe before that. I had an encounter with a nice buck, and he was just out of bow range, and then you came in there. So we were still building. That's kind of what I'm getting at is the times that we've had encounters like that where you actually did get a crack at a buck, or the week before that when I got a crack at a buck or almost got a crack at one.
When you came to Tennessee and we went to a spot that I'd been hunting, and you just came for a short weekend and had that big buck chase that doe flying right by you.
Yeah, when we look back, it's always when we've built on it over. So if you are traveling to go hunt, maybe it's a place that you can get to, at least like 2 weekends a month or something. I would say that's maybe like a minimum, at least for me. Or maybe it's an area that you have multiple years of history with, kind of foreshadowing next week's episode a little bit. You have multiple years of history with, at least that's been my experience. And so that's kind of shifted the way that I've thought about things. And another thing that Pike mentioned that was kind of interesting is focusing more on the longer trips and not jumping around so much. So, find an area close to your house that you want to invest time in, that's fun to hunt, that you think you can be successful at, whether it be a hunting club right down the road or a WMA right down the road or national forest, whatever you're hunting, and have that kind of be your main thing. And that's what you're going to be hunting 90% of the time. And then go out and instead of doing, 5 different weekends in whatever areas, do like 10 days in one area, 7 to 10 days in one area. What's your opinion on that?
Yeah, I mean, I've always had that opinion. Like, if you can do it, that's great. But the problem is a lot of people, because of family, work, they don't have the capability to be able to ask off, extended period of time, be able to hunt for 5, 6, 7 days without having some kind of issue. Man, that was your phone going off, man. You don't have your phone on silent. Lord have mercy.
Amateur.
But so it's if you can do that, whether you're hunting your hunting club, your lease, some private land that you've got access to, or some public land, if you can take off and be able to hunt literally 5 to 7 days in a row, like you're going to compound. Just more time you spend in the woods during a tight window of time, you're going to be able to build on patterns day after day and be able to kind of hunt your way into some deer. When you start bouncing around a whole bunch, in 2 different ways, if you are bouncing around from, like, say, public to public, kind of like what we used to do, you never learn an area good enough to have success if you are bouncing around, it's like there's a pattern to it. Like, hey, I know at this month in November, I'm going to this piece of public. I'm going to hunt there for 3 weekends. Okay, if I can't hunt during the week, I'm going to hunt for 3 weekends and kind of learn during that period of time for whatever reason. Maybe it's they're rutting or pre-rut, whatever. And then I'm going to bounce to another spot. But it's like you have to do the same pattern. You can't just randomly. I know some guys that can. I can't do it. We're like, this weekend I'm going to this part of the state to hunt this piece of public land. I'm going to hunt for a day and a half, 2 days. And then I won't come back there for 2 months. And then I'm going to go to another piece. It's like because you're starting over every time. And you can do the same thing in the hunting club. if you can only hunt on the weekend, okay, when you go from 1 week to the next week and you're only maybe capable of hunting like a Saturday, it's still kind of jumping around. Like that pattern can change, especially like between early season and the mid season, especially if you don't rut until like December or January. As stuff's changing, unless you have a lot of cameras out there and you're able to kind of scout through trail cameras and do a lot of preseason scouting, find out where your cameras need to be at, and then kind of let them soak, it makes it super tough to figure out what are the deer doing at this point in time when there's other guys hunting the club. So it's like same thing of on a hunting club is like if you can get time where like, if your place ruts in January, like the first week of January, go out there, hunt a good bit in December and really trying to figure out like where these doe groups are at, and then understand like that first 5-6 days of January, if I can take off or get some time off work to go hunt it, I'm going to up my chances so much more by doing that than again just trying to kill a deer on a Saturday and just kind of get lucky with it. So like there's a bunch of different ways that someone could jump around and not have success. And then also another thing is jumping around, because I'm guilty of this, and we talked about this last week with Pike, or on Monday's episode with Pike, about even on one piece of property, jumping around from spot to spot instead of like honing in on an area that you're really learning really well. Kind of taking an approach that Wes Moe talked about on the podcast, maybe like in 2019. I think you were living in Auburn at the time, or 2018.
Yeah.
And he was like, take a 1,000-acre chunk of a piece of public, or 500 acres, and just learn it and focus on it. Don't bounce around to a bunch of different pieces where you don't really learn anything. Like stay in one area that has everything you're looking for, has the diversity, has, the cover, has everything that you're looking for, and just learn it and focus on it. And you'll have a lot more success by doing that than just jumping from, one side of a piece of public to another side of a piece of public, or same thing on a hunting club. It's almost like if you can learn like a 500 to 1,000 acre chunk of it, if your club's that big or bigger, and focus in that area, you're going to have a lot more success than just try and jump around from spot to spot.
Yeah, man, I used to get burned on that on the place we used to hunt a whole bunch. Man, I would hunt like on Saturday, I would hunt one spot, and then on like Sunday afternoon, I would hunt another spot on the same WMA, but like 6 miles away, and it's just like totally different, and I don't know. I think part of that, I'm curious on your thoughts on this. I think part of that comes from, like doing this podcast and hearing so many people talk about so many different things. This is also another thing we kind of touched on with Pike. You hear so many different tactics, and this goes for the listeners as well. You hear so many different tactics, and you want to try so many of them that you're looking at this spot, you're like, oh, so-and-so talked about doing this, like in this kind of situation, and then you find this other spot over here, and you're like, oh, but then this other guy was talking about doing this, and you end up kind of trying to do both. And it doesn't really work out.
Maybe. I mean, I was doing that before we even started the podcast. When I first started hunting public, I'd be on one side of a WMA on a morning hunt, and then afternoon spot, I'd be 10 miles away or 6 miles away in a different spot. And it was just like, I think it was part of the having that rambler personality or mindset where like, I'm just going to keep jumping around until I like get lucky and get into something, and like wanting to see some new ground instead of just like focusing. Like this is when like kind of taking like that private land perspective of like, you have a very specific, like public land, of course, you have boundaries, but some public land, at least a lot of public land that we have in the state of Alabama, there are some smaller chunks that are, less than 2,000 acres, but most of them are pretty sizable pieces of public. And it's like you could literally drive 30 minutes to one side of the WMA and hunt something completely different, looks completely different from the other side, and be able to bounce around. Versus like a guy that only has 100 acres to hunt on his little private farm, his lease, or maybe 500 acres on a little club. That's all he has, and that's all they can focus on. So it's like you got to be almost more strategic in that aspect, at least to be successful. And I think if you take that perspective of being more strategic in a very specific spot, very specific area. I say spot, I don't mean like one tree. I mean like again 500 acre section. Like pick you a road that goes to the WMA, and be like, I'm only focusing on this section of this road, both sides of the road, 500 acres, 800 acres, whatever, and this is what I'm going to learn the most. And I'm just going to focus my time here instead of like bouncing around. Because, I mean, when I used to do that, it's like I would kill deer every now and then, but it was a lot of this like, man, it looks like I should have been here 2 weeks ago. Like you'd find crazy sign and you sit it and you wouldn't see anything. I'm like, man, I bet you they just kind of came in here, these bucks laid a bunch of sign down, and they kind of shifted back out, or they're kind of using it a little bit differently now. And it's like if you just focus in that area and you spend your time there and not hunt the same tree, but just kind of bounce around that spot, you'll be able to stay up to date on the activity in that area. When bucks are laying down sign, when you're seeing does, when you see doe groups start breaking up and the does are starting to be, singled out when they're getting ready to come in the heat and bucks are kind of bumping them versus just jumping around and you're just trying to, get lucky per se.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, that's a really good point. I got a total curveball for you.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So this Saturday in Pelham, Alabama, there is a CAB meeting, Conservation Advisory Board. So
that's what CAB stands for.
Yes.
I was wondering.
So that's what, in Alabama, those are essentially the people who set our regulations. Okay. So there's like 16 of them, and I'm not even really sure how they get put into place, but there's like 16 members of the.
What's it take to get us on the board?
Hey, yeah, that's right. They ought to add us. And you can go to these meetings and they talk about proposed changes, and you can give your public input. So if you're upset about the turkey season being pushed back, you can go and tell them, don't do that. Basically, you can address the board, and you can also hear about what they have proposed or whatever. So I've never been to one. I'm planning on going to this one. I don't know if I'm gonna be able to stay for the whole thing because I got to be in a wedding that day. So.
Tell Grant you can be late, bro.
Yeah, I asked him. I was like, "Hey, what time do I need to be at the venue?" Because I'm in the wedding, so we got to take pictures and stuff. So I don't know. We're gonna be cutting it kind of close. Might have to show up to the meeting in my wedding attire, which would look absolutely ridiculous.
No, we'll get you up on stage and talk.
I don't know. Maybe people dress fancy for these things. I don't know.
But anyways, back to the CAB meeting.
All right, so the CAB meeting. A friend of ours, Jeremy Freeman, put me in a group message with a couple other guys who he knows are coming to kind of discuss, some things that we might want to bring up to the board. And one of the fellas, me and one of the guys in the group message are having kind of an interesting discussion right now about. He has an idea. I just want to get how this strikes you. Mm-hmm. His idea would be creating. Basically what's the word he used? Oh, dadgummit. I can't. He used a specific word for it, but basically a sanctuary system on WMAs. I think he used the word oscillating, where it changes every year. So you take X WMA.
And you can't hunt specific spots?
I'm getting there.
Okay.
So you take X WMA. I can already tell your opinion on this. Let's say this WMA is 60,000 acres.
Okay.
You take 3,000 acres of it.
Okay.
And you make it, I think he proposed it two different ways. You make it off limits. Okay. Off limits for a year.
Yeah.
And then the next year, it opens back up and a different 3,000 acres opens up. With the whole idea being you're giving that area a breather. No one's supposed to be able to go in there. Theoretically, no turkeys are going to get shot in there. No bucks are going to get shot. So you should have more gobblers and you should have bigger bucks and whatnot.
Uh-huh.
Or you could do it as archery only. So you can make it archery only for all species. So that would essentially eliminate small game, but you could still bow hunt turkeys and deer if you desire in that area. How does that strike you?
Hell no.
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 I knew you were going to say that.
Absolutely not. I'm sorry. Listen, go do that to your hunting club. Because first off, if they do it on public land, and especially if it's in the middle, of some public, not great road system go through there, you know how many outlaws? That's where they're going to be hunting.
Oh
man,
bro.
you're making a poacher's dream. I mean, isolated piece of public. He slips in there with a rod. Dude, ain't no way that's gonna work.
I'm curious on the YouTube comments for people to hit us up on this and give us their opinions. I kind of said the same thing. I'm like, man, that sounds good on paper, but I have a couple problems with it. First of all, we don't have near the amount of public land that we used to have, say, 15 years ago in Alabama. We've lost several entire WMAs.
Yeah.
We've lost good chunks of other WMAs that have been cut in half or more. So anything that restricts access even more, I think you're going in the wrong direction. But also, I feel like it's always a balancing act of...
Keep going, sorry.
It's always a balancing act of you're trying to give people the best quality hunt, but also preserve the most opportunity. So, example, some people would say, Alabama should go to and be a $1 state because we would have much bigger bucks if you did that. And I'm like, go to Kentucky. That's me. I'm like, I like the heritage of us being a $3 state. People have the freedom to do whatever they want to do. If you want a place that's more restrictive, you can go to certain pieces of public that are very restrictive that have bigger bucks, or you could go join a trophy club. But to impose that on like the entire state, one example of this is there's a WMA that we used to hunt years ago that didn't have antler point restrictions. And they, after we had hunted it for a while, they put antler point restrictions on, and we were all upset about it. And sure enough, like I had Tiffany out there one time, and the first year they had antler point restrictions. We had the perfect opportunity at like a big old forky or something.
I thought it was a big spike. Okay.
No, it was a spike and a forky.
Okay.
And they were crossing a power line, and I mean, she was cool as a cucumber. She was up on the gun, and like, I just wanted to let her shoot it, but I'm like, no, you can't shoot it because we have antler point restrictions. And it's like, man, that kind of sucked that we kind of missed that great opportunity. And after a couple of years, we did see, would you say that we saw like an increase in buck quality on that place after the antler point restriction was put in?
I mean, probably, but like, I think it also has to do with social media. I mean, yeah, and also becoming better deer hunters helped.
That's what I'm saying.
But so like, I don't know if it's like truly antler point restrictions made it better, because I knew guys back then that were killing gigantic deer on that place.
Yes, that's my point exactly.
Like gigantic deer there was no antler point restrictions. So it's like, it goes back to like guys like Scott and Nick, who's been on the podcast before. We're talking about only like a very small percentage of bucks are going to get killed every year.
Yeah.
Just because of how thick the cover is. It's not like you're hunting big ag land where like if a deer comes out, anybody can see him from 500 yards away or, whatever, and take a crack shot at him. So with that being said, it's like, I mean, antler point restrictions, yeah, that's whatever. Like, say it's got to be, 3 points on one side, 4 points on one side, whatever the reg could be. And a lot of WMAs in Alabama, now it's 3 points on one side, or there's a couple of 4 points on one side as the regulation. And the thing is there's going to be so many deer that still don't get shot. I mean, you're always going to have more younger bucks getting killed for a couple reasons, because there's more younger bucks than there are, mature deer, typically. And like we did, what was it? When Mississippi State came out with that study that we did an episode on back in maybe January, and they were talking about the age class of all the different bucks and how the bucks are moving around GPS study. Of course, you're going to have a lot more 2 and 3 year old bucks, 1.5 year old bucks on the landscape than a 5-6 year old deer. You're just going to have more because they get killed for whatever reason, predation, whatever, get hit by cars. And I think antler point restrictions definitely makes a lot of people think that like, oh, we're instantly going to have bigger bucks. But also it's like, if you have, I don't think there's many WMAs in the state, especially when you talk to guys like Wes Moe and even Michael Perry talking about hunting back in like the 70s and 80s on public, when there was way more people on public in Alabama, way more. Like Wes Moe talked about one WMA, it'd be nothing for a gun hunt during the rut, having 2,500 to 3,000 people check in for one day's gun hunt.
Yeah.
On a piece of public.
And some of the worst pressure we've ever seen was down on that same place, and it was like 1,500 people had checked in.
Yeah. And it's like, and there's still big bucks there. And, some people are going to shoot some small deer. Some people's going to, try to hold up for a bigger buck, whatever. But, I mean, I'm not opposed to, like, a little bit of, like, an antler point restriction, at least on, like, 2 of the 3 deer that you got to kill, something like that in a season.
Yeah.
But when you're talking about going back to the whole sanctuary thing, I just think you're opening up a can of worms that's not going to be followed, first off. It opens the doors for a lot of people to be, especially turkey gobbling. Dude, if he's in the middle of the public land, this sanctuary, and we don't have enough game warrants as we sit to be able to patrol.
That was another point I had.
That sucker, there's 10 birds out there hammering. I guarantee there's going to be some good old boys slipping right across there, killing some birds, okay? Because, I mean, there's already people now that even with, like, like they changed the regs, talking about turkeys here specifically, you can only kill two gobblers per piece of public. So, like, on one WMA, one section of National Forest, whatever. And so you got to bounce around. Well, there are still guys that will shoot 4 turkeys or go exceed their limit on one piece of public land.
Oh, dude. That's another thing I was telling them in that group message, because we were talking about non-resident regulations and should they be different. Like, should a non-resident in Alabama only be able to kill 1 or 2 turkeys as opposed to the resident bag limit of 4? So right now, if you buy a non-resident license, you can come here and kill 4 turkeys. And I was like, no, because if they spend, whatever it is for like $375 for a license, and they can come kill 4 turkeys, have at it.
Yeah. Because
we have people here, residents here, who are killing 20 turkeys a year in Alabama. That is not that uncommon. We've had interviews, okay? We've had people who we were planning on interviewing who, you're sitting there like it kind of. We talk about how we vet people out. This is why we vet people out. We've had people who were like, "Yeah, I killed 11 in Alabama last year," and we're like, "I'm sorry, like what? You killed 11?" And it's just casually mentioned. Like they don't. It's not even a big deal to them. And basically, they just don't want to quit hunting, so they keep killing birds. I'm like, until we can fix that, let's not talk about the other stuff. In my opinion, same thing for the bag limit. It's like. I've heard like murmurings that they're talking about lowering the bag limit again. I don't know if that's true.
That, and I've heard, about them pushing the season back an additional 10 days for turkeys.
Gross.
So, that's something supposedly that might be brought up at this meeting, which I
So that's all hearsay. That's not confirmed.
Yeah,
that's just what people have been talking about. That's one reason that we're going to go to this meeting.
Yep, and see
what they're actually talking about. But I'm like, why would you? I don't see the point in lowering the bag limit when we don't even have enough game wardens to enforce our current bag limit.
Yeah.
Right. So you're just like regulating the guys who enjoy turkey hunting the most.
Yeah, absolutely. Also, another thing, and actually, I've had a couple guys bring this up because Mississippi seems to have had good success with this, and I'm all about for each individual state kind of protecting their residents. Like Arkansas, great example. This past year, Arkansas changed their regulations. We're used to. I've hunted Arkansas quite a bit in the past 5-6 years, and you used to be able to buy a big game license for like $350, non-resident annual license. Came with 2 buck tags. I think you got like 4 doe tags, your 2 turkey tags, and you got a bear tag for like $350, $400. Well, last year they changed it where they had a big game license that's for deer, and it was like $410. You got your deer permits, deer tags. To hunt turkeys, you had to still buy that $410 big game permit. And then you had to buy a turkey tag, which was $100 a piece. You could buy up to 2 tags. So if all you want to do was turkey hunt Arkansas, like this year, and you're just going for a week, you can't buy a short-term license. You have to buy the annual $410 license and then a $100 turkey permit for each turkey up to 2 turkeys. So like if one guy wanted to go to Arkansas for, again, a 5-day trip to kill 1 turkey, it'd cost him like $500 and some change, like $510.
If he's just going to hit public land.
Yeah, just for 1 turkey. That's how much it would cost you. And when they first did it, I was like, man, that sucks. But then again, I'm like, I get it. If they see like their turkey numbers were that bad, there's that much increase in non-resident pressure,
and they want chasing 49,
and they want to protect their residents.
Yeah,
I'm all for like, okay, like it is what it is. Like I'm all for it. And then like Mississippi, a couple of years ago, they went to that quota system, that draw quota system for non-residents to be able to hunt the first ever how many days of the season, and you draw your permit. And I think it was like, I can't remember how much. It might be like $10. So it might be free for some of it, and then they charge for another type of permit. And it cuts down a lot on the non-resident pressure. Like for you to legally be able to hunt the first, whatever, 10 days, 20 days, whatever the season, you had to draw one of those permits.
Yeah.
And I had a couple guys bring that up. Like, I wish we would do that in Alabama to kind of help cut down on some of that pressure early in the season. Like if you want to come a little bit mid-season or late season, I mean, again, we killed birds late season. It's fine. But to keep that pressure down for the residents, because a lot of residents are only going to hunt for like 2 weeks, maybe 3 weeks a season. That's it. 3 weekends to be done. But to do a quota system, a draw system for the first, 2 weeks a season on public, and then kind of open it up to, whoever wants to come, they can buy their permits. Well, I've heard that being discussed, which would be an interesting concept. Because again, Mississippi, Adam Butler, the turkey biologist for Mississippi, I heard him on the Wild Turkey Science podcast with Dr. Will Goolsby and Dr. Marcus Lashley. And they brought that up in their interview, talking about the quota system. And Adam's like, it seems to be very successful for us. You're just kind of letting the residents have that opportunity for that first week or so season. You have a small number of non-residents coming in. Residents can have some good hunts, hopefully kill a bird, and then it kind of opens up to the public from that point, and so on. So I think that'd be something interesting, even if more states did that. I mean, I know a lot of the hardcore turkey guys that like to travel all over the place, it kind of would hurt you a little bit. You'd have to either try to draw or just wait until it opens and then kind of bounce around. But, just kind of help the residents out. I'm all for that.
Yeah, and I'm kind of curious about states doing some kind of turkey stamp, kind of like how you do a duck stamp. I've heard people throw that around too as a potential way to get funding that specifically goes for turkeys and turkey habitat. Because this is also the other point that I brought up in the group message, because we're talking about turkey regulations a lot. because we're fresh off turkey season, and I'm like, I don't know if we really have this turkey problem where turkey numbers are going down. I don't think it's something we can regulate our way out of.
You didn't listen to that episode, did you?
What?
This week's episode, Wild Turkey Science podcast, did you?
No, I haven't listened to it.
That's exactly what they talked about.
Oh, look, see, we're on the same page.
And there's it was interesting because Dr. Will Goolsby, he went real in depth on it, talking about of all the studies that's been done and all the testing that's been done, there's no evidence as of right now that any regulations have made a difference on turkey recruitment.
Yeah.
And poult recruitment.
Yeah.
And putting more turkeys on the landscape. Even pushing seasons back. Again, y'all need to go back and listen to the last 3 episodes of the Wild Turkey Science podcast. Really, really good show. And they had some really good guests, and they talked about a lot of these studies. And pretty much what they came to the conclusion is, as of right now, there's no specific hunting regulations that kind of showed, helping turkey recruitment out, but also lowering harvest numbers. They've had all the rules, like in Alabama now, some other states, you can't fan turkeys, can't use decoys first 10 days of season. Mm-hmm. And we're still killing the same amount of turkeys as we did before that. And they're like, it doesn't make a difference.
No.
That's not making, they're like, I don't think we can, put in new rules and regulations or legislation that can truly affect turkey harvest without truly hindering hunting opportunities and taking hunting opportunities away from people.
Yeah.
So, and they had a really good conversation about the habitat aspect versus predator aspect in this week's episode. And, in some states it may be one over the other. It might be a big issue on the habitat aspect, not having good nesting habitat and brooding habitat. And then some states is a mix of both, that and predation. And some states is the predators are just, unbelievable in some areas.
Yeah.
So just a really, really interesting discussion there that they had. And I kind of hope maybe Dr. Goolsby might be at that cabin. I need to message him.
Oh, yeah, that would be cool. We've got to talk to them at some point.
Yep.
I'm sure we will here in the near future. But yeah, that's a really interesting subject, and I think it's just a habitat thing, and it kind of goes back to what we were talking about, I guess, towards the end of deer season, where I think for real change to happen, there's going to have to be some kind of incentive structure put in place for timber companies or private landowners to do habitat management on their land. I don't know what that looks like. I don't know if that looks like tax breaks. I don't know what it looks like.
Yeah.
But just throwing that out there as food for thought. Again, YouTube comments, I'd be curious what y'all say. But I think it's going to take some kind of partnership like that because we can talk about public land all we want, but 97% of Alabama and a lot of the Southeast is private.
Yep.
And so it has to happen on private land for there to be that big of an impact. But anyways, kind of looping it back to the whole sanctuary thing. It's just kind of an interesting idea. I hadn't really heard it floated before. My only other concern with it is, could you imagine the place where you missed that 10 point, where you backstrapped that big 10 point,
mm-hmm.
the pressure down there? Mm-hmm. Could you imagine taking a 3,000-4,000 acre chunk of that and making it off limits? What that would do to the rest of the place?
Oh yeah, for sure.
Because you're just taking everyone who hunts in there and you're displacing them onto the rest of the
You're concentrating them to other portions of it. Yeah, it's just, again, I think it's a great idea for maybe a hunting club or something like that. Where you have 15 people hunting 1,500 acres and putting 200 acres or 300 acres into a quote unquote sanctuary. That maybe you just save until the last week of season or something like that you hunt.
Yeah.
But on public land, yeah, no, it's not as cut and dry on hunting pressure and what that's going to look like. And again, people just completely disregarding that regulation and just having a free for all.
Yeah, again, I want the reason I brought it up is because I want audience input. So I'd like to see some YouTube comments and maybe some emails about what other people think about the idea and kind of how it strikes them. Maybe is there something similar going on in your state? Or do you have a hunting club that's maybe tried that in the past? How'd it work out for you? So just kind of curious on input on all of that. But anyways, that's always kind of fun to talk about.
Yeah. Well, I'll say this. If you're a listener in Alabama, and especially if you're, fairly close to Birmingham, and I know we have a lot of listeners within an hour and a half of Birmingham, I would highly recommend you guys, if you're available Saturday, again, the 18th, that comes to that CAB meeting. I'm planning on for sure being there and attending it. We'll have a bunch of other people there, some other past podcast guests. I know a couple of them have talked about trying to get up and speak when they do kind of open, I guess, not really Q&A, but, let people kind of speak their mind on different topics. So definitely come out and support it, whether you're hunting public land or private land. I think it's going to be very important, especially just from what I've heard in the ether. If you're a turkey hunter, you really need to be there. Especially if you're a turkey hunter, you need to be at this meeting. So anyway, hopefully it'd be a good time to see you guys there. I didn't even talk to you about this beforehand. Might need to do some kind of Southern Outdoorsman giveaway coming in to that show. Like if you come to the meeting, put your little name in the hat, give out some Southern Outdoorsman merch after the meeting or something. I don't know. We need some attendees.
I don't know how the Conservation Advisory Board would feel about that.
Hey,
I don't know. Maybe get people in the door.
Get an extra 500 people there. Listen,
hey, that would be kind of legit.
That's a little intimidating. If
maybe take some stickers with you. Look, y'all just look for the red beard.
Yeah, pretty easy to find me.
Yeah, he's pretty easy to find. Like I said, I should be there. I don't know how long it's going to last, so I don't know if I'm going to have to dip out early or not, but I should be able to be there for at least the first hour.
Yeah.
It says it starts promptly at 9 a.m. That's what it said, promptly at 9 a.m. So we'll see if they stick to
I'll
that.
be there at 7:30. We'll be tailgating.
Got the grill out in the parking lot. All right, let's hit some Q&As. This is the first time we've done Q&As in quite a while.
Yep.
Kind of got away from them. We were doing kind of both deer and turkey content.
Yeah, and so Q&As, again, there's a link down in the show notes of the podcast and on YouTube as well in the show description where you can click the link, leave us a question that we'll answer on these Thursday episodes. So right now, as we're transitioning more into deer content, feel free to write those questions in. Or if you have any other specific questions, feel free to write them in. And we'll try to answer, try to do 2, 3, maybe 4 of them every Thursday. I know we have a bunch in the back catalog, but again, if you have some questions, please write them in and we'll be able to kind of take care of those.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, we're working through them. So y'all be sure to write some more of those in.
Gosh, man, put your phone on Do Not Disturb, son.
Oh, that's my computer that's dinging.
Lord.
You can't hear it in the mic.
I can hear it.
All right. This is from Reagan McDonald from Texas. He said, relatively new to the podcast, been listening for a few months. I have gone back and started with y'all's Glenn Solomon interview. Love the Josh Driver interviews too. Really, all those have been great. I just listened to episode 176 with Troy Pottenger. My question is, have y'all used his ideas on mock scrapes and his tactics? Yes, we have. Jacob, do you want to kind of explain for maybe if someone hasn't heard Troy's podcast, like what it's all about? First of all, go and listen to it. It's episode 176.
Oh, you already had, okay, cool.
So
I was going to look it up.
So if you were going to put it in a nutshell, how would you describe like his tactics?
To be honest, I need to go back and re-listen to it and kind of get a refresher. It's been a while. It was like 2019, 2020 when we did that interview.
Yeah, it was a while back.
I mean, part of what he's doing is through scouting, finding these areas, these kind of high travel areas. He's hunting more mountainous areas of Idaho and Montana, and finding areas where you have compounding terrain features all coming together, specifically on the side of a mountain that gives him good access getting in there. And if there's not already like a big community scrape in this location, he's building a big mock scrape and again implementing scents in there. And he likes to use synthetic scents, but one big aspect of what he does, and he talks about in the episode, is strategically having these mock scrapes in areas with low light. And what he means by that is like dense canopy cover of, especially, I think in his area is a lot more deciduous trees. Mm-hmm. Actually, no, not deciduous. What's the other one? Coniferous.
Yeah. Pines
and spruce and all that kind of stuff where they hold their leaves all year. And it adds a lot more shade. It's a lower, dimmer light throughout all times of the day. And he mentions in the episode that it seems like these mature bucks, especially these really big mature bucks, like moving through areas that have a lot lower light, just because they can see real well in that, but they feel hidden, and that's like a really big factor for him when he's hunting these specific spots. And then kind of playing into factor thermals and wind direction and all that kind of stuff of how he sets them up. But we tried. I remember the first year when we interviewed him, you and Michael Pike went crazy with some of that stuff that fall, which I think was the fall of 2020. Maybe it might have been 2019. I'm trying to think. That's when Pike was hunting with us real heavy. And I mean, running a bunch of trail cameras, kind of implementing some of the scents and everything, and having mixed results. But we've had, fair amount of listener success stories come in from implementing his mock scrape tactics.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that's what I killed my mountain buck on 2 years ago. Mm-hmm. Was pretty much exactly what Troy was talking about, and it's finding these big community scrapes, specifically up in the mountains, but it can work with flatland too if you can find them. But finding these big community scrapes that these bucks like to frequent and running cameras on them, figuring out when they want to be there. And so I took a lot of what Troy said and tried that here in Alabama, and we've actually got the video on our YouTube channel of it's not the exact spot on the map, but I used a very similar area and I actually show everybody on the map like exactly how it's set up. And there's two big community scrapes. We're going to talk more about them on next Thursday's episode. But there's these two specific big community scrapes on the side of this mountain. They're about 250, 300 yards apart. And they've been there, like what Troy talks about is finding those scrapes that have been there for like years and years and years. Like the licking branch is just gnarled up. There's like an indention in the ground, and like they've been scraping in this one spot for like 15, 20 years or longer. Mm-hmm. And keying in on those. And so I think it took me a little while to kind of get the hang of it, because again, that was like probably 2020, and I didn't kill a deer on that until 2022. So it must have been 2019, and then 2022, December of 2022 is when we actually killed bucks in spots like that. So I think it worked really good down here, especially if you're in any kind of hill country where you got decent hills. We've also done some other really good scrape episodes. Our episode with Greg Skufka is another really good one to listen to. I can't remember the number of that one off the top of my head, but you can go to thesouthernoutdoorsman.com and you can type in whoever's name that we bring up on our website, and it'll pull that episode right up. So like when you go to the website, there's like a podcast feed right there, and it's at the very top of that podcast feed. There's a little search bar right sitting on top of all of that podcast feed. And that's where you need to search it, and it'll bring up whatever you're looking for. So Greg Skufka, that's another really, really good scrape episode that you should listen to if you're interested in that kind of tactic. But yes, we have tried it, and yes, it did work.
Looking up Greg's episode right now. So Greg Skufka, that is episode 286. It's Licking Branch Magic with Greg Skufka.
Man, I can't believe it was that long ago.
286.
Whoa.
October 4th of 2021. And that's the name of his book, by the way. He's got a book called Licking Branch Magic.
Yes.
Where he talks about his strategy specifically with, putting these mock scrapes in and running his licking branches in order to get, all different types of deer using, a specific scrape.
Yep. All right. This one is from Michael Mashburn from Alabama. He said, I just want to let you know your podcast is awesome. I have learned so much from both you guys and your guest. Appreciate that. My biggest question is regarding how you approach an area close to bedding. The WMA hunt in North Alabama seems to set up where access is either you have to decide and like bust through a cutover, or you have to go through areas deer may be feeding in order to get to the hard transitions I hear everyone talk about. Have you had these situations where you hunt, and if so, what was your solution? I would just like to see some scenarios where you think bedding is and how you'd approach the area. So yeah, this is a pretty interesting question. This is kind of a common one, and I think the best example of this, he's already been mentioned, is Josh Driver. Episode 512 is when we did the throwback to his original episode, which was 141, episode 512, and he talks about positive and negative terrain, and this is what has helped me specifically kind of navigate this. And positive terrain, negative terrain, just being where the deer are probably at that moment. Mm-hmm. So let's say you're going in for a morning hunt. Actually, Scott Seals talked about this in his feed tree episode. If you're going in for a morning hunt before daylight, let's say early season, the deer are probably down in the bottoms, eating on white oaks, persimmons, like whatever is down there. Or if you got crop fields, they're out in the crop fields. They're on the feed usually before daylight. And so they're not in those thicker bedding areas and those harder transitions before daylight. And so like Scott mentioned, he would actually go and access through that thick cutover before daylight, because there probably would be some deer in it, but there's not going to be as many deer in it, especially if you're going in very, very early. So that would be your quote unquote negative terrain. If you flip that in the afternoon, so if you're walking in at like 1 o'clock, especially again talking about an early season scenario where they're not rutting and doing all this crazy stuff, they're on a bed to food pattern, most likely your deer are in the bedding areas at like 1 p.m., for instance. And as you're walking in, those big feed areas, that would be your negative terrain, those wide open woods where maybe you've got some oaks dropping in there or whatever the case may be. The deer aren't really on it at like 1 p.m., in like middle of the day. So you can access through that to get up to those hard edges to get closer to the bedding. So you're just accessing through wherever the deer probably are not at that given time.
By the way, you didn't specify what is positive and negative terrain.
Positive terrain would be where the deer are at that moment. Negative terrain would be where the deer are not at that given moment. So again, negative terrain is going to be, in most cases, like your wide open woods for afternoon access. Do you have anything to add to that? I mean,
Nah. I mean, the thing is, like, in a situation like that, you know, if you have to get through bedding to get to, like, where the deer at, like, say it's really thick close to the roads, I mean, the easiest thing, because, I mean, we hunt a lot of places like that. It's like you got to find, like, a little drainage, like a little SMZ that comes off that road that you can use that to slip down and get on the backside of some of that bedding, especially if you're going in the afternoons.
yeah.
You know, I wouldn't want to be busting right through a big bedding thicket unless that's not the thicket I'm trying to hunt and I have to get through it in order to get further back into another spot. But if you're trying to hunt one of those areas with the deer, you know, within a couple hundred yards of the road, like you need to find some kind of SMZ little drainage that comes off that road bed that you can get down in, specifically in afternoon hunts, and slip down and then maybe come up the backside of wherever they're bedding at.
What's your take on this? We talk about buck bedding from time to time, and we used to be real hot and heavy in the buck bedding thing, and then we just found out that it kind of doesn't work in the deep south and where you have a lot of thick cover. And I know people will fight me on that.
Doesn't work for us. How about that?
So one thing is you can go out and you can find beds. Like the beds are there. It's just he's probably not using one bed all the time. He's probably using like 8 different beds or more than that. But you can go and find the beds and see where they like to bed. And so we spent several years doing that all the time. Like probably found thousands of beds over the years. And Michael's like this too. So after doing that, would you say that gave you, like before and after, did that give you a much better idea of how to avoid deer that are bedded? So like, for instance, if you're going in on an afternoon hunt, you're looking at the map and you're like, okay, you drop that pin and you're like, he's probably bedded like right here in this area within, 150 yards of this. So this is how I need to go in to avoid him. Would you say that helped you?
Yeah, I mean, for sure. I mean, it always helps if you have a general idea of where you think a deer could bed at. Mm-hmm. But just like an example, like the podcast we recorded at Eco Wild, Travis Lee, one of the guests that was on the podcast along with Jeff Baggett, Travis was talking about one buck in particular he killed, one of his bigger bucks he's ever killed in South Alabama, was bedded early season on a wide open hardwood ridge surrounded by thick cover, which is kind of opposite. Most time we'd think he'd be in that thick stuff, and he just learned, after he didn't really specify whether he was bumping the deer, but also with trail cameras that the buck was just staying on this open hardwood ridge, kind of bedding up in brush tops. But it kind of goes in, like when you scout one of those areas, where are you jumping deer at? Like if you jump a buck, which is hard, it's hard. Like you hear guys in the Midwest like, oh man, I jumped a buck, and they actually maybe could see the deer. Or around us is like most time if you jump a deer like out of some thick cover, like you never see them. Like they just keep going through the thick cover. All you hear is
crashing.
You're crashing through a bunch of stuff, and you're like, oh man, that sounded like a buck, or oh man, it sounded like a doe. Like wasn't that loud? Or oh man, it was a real big buck. He just sounded like he was crashing through all kinds of stuff.
I can hear his antlers hitting the trees.
Yeah, and it's like you really don't ever truly know if you can't lay eyes on the animal. So it does help if you have a general idea of potentially where that deer could be bedded. And most time that comes into like, where have I jumped deer at that time of the year? Like last year I had a early season bow hunt in October where I've gotten to a spot where I was kind of backtracking sign on I guess that was mid-morning, and I was kind of backtracking sign and got to a habitat edge, transition edge between kind of like some real thick or thicker, almost like bigger saplings, almost like a little clear cut, but it wasn't a clear cut, just some wind damage, like storm damage that came through, and then it came up against some bigger hardwoods, and I jumped the deer up right there. Never could see the deer. I could hear it running off and sound all this commotion, and I got down there below where it was bedded at, and there was bucks on all over the place, scrapes and rubs. So I assumed it was a buck. May not have been, but I played it like it was a buck and went back into the next morning and tried to kill him if it was a buck, and never ended up seeing. I don't think I ended up seeing a deer that morning. I think I tried to stalk some pigs later on. So,
yeah.
But anyway, it's just like it makes it so tough to like confirm exactly if you think that buck's bedded in some spots, unless you're using trail cameras. Again, you're hearing on a future episode, we had Travis Lee back on the podcast. He uses trail cameras early season to pattern bucks and figure out very, very closely of where they're bedding and try to get camera images of them right before daylight, going back to bed, and then, right at the last 30 minutes of daylight coming from the bed. And he has a lot of success in early season doing so, finding like where a buck's at least spending some time for like a short window of time. Like, he gets that image. He's like, I got to go kill him now before he shifts and does something different. And he has a lot of success doing that. But also his habitat he hunts is a little bit different from, I think, what we hunt, where we're hunting a little bit more big woods, and some of his stuff's not necessarily just big wood settings.
Yeah. The last thing I'll say about that, too, is this is actually a pretty good time of year to plan your access in areas like that. Like, for instance, when we talked to Scott about early season feed tree tactics, he would prep access routes through those pine thickets, because, like, walking through a pine thicket, dude, not fun. Not fun. So go in ahead of time and prep some kind of access trail, whether you just got to push everything out of the way and kind of make your own little trail through there, or if you got to mark a trail somehow, like whatever you got to do. I've got a couple spots on the club. I'm planning on doing that this summer, hopefully early summer before it gets too terrible outside. But go ahead and plan that specifically for when you got to go in and like go through some kind of thicket. But also just in general, it's a pretty good time of year to plan your access. If you already have history with an area and maybe you've kind of already scouted it, you kind of know what's going on, maybe you could go in there and really fine tune that access, because that could be the difference between killing something and not killing something.
Yep, absolutely.
All right, last one. This is Andrew DeWitt. This is from a Spotify comment, okay? So you can actually comment on these podcasts on Spotify. So y'all go do that. We get several of those from time to time, so I try to include them in here. He said, how do I determine when to kill my does? We are slightly doe heavy, and I feel like it did affect the rut activity this last fall. Is it early October? Should it be just like yearly does? I'm in Oklahoma. That's a pretty good question. We've had several like deer managers on the podcast, like Alan Summerford comes to mind. I would go like listen to anything Alan Summerford was on, but I don't think it matters a lot. Especially if you got to bring down the population of does, like you want to just do it when you can.
Well,
I would say.
Yeah,
right?
that's what Alan says. But it also is like, do you want to do it where it will enhance the rut this year, or are you just trying to do it just to overall manage? Because if you're trying to do it for this year, you need to kill them early. If you don't really care, then you need to kill them late. And also, by the way, not funny. That's not really funny, but a conversation here all the time. Man, don't shoot does late season because they're pregnant. And
I think that is funny.
And you're like, man, you're killing a pregnant doe. If you kill one early season, she ain't gonna get pregnant.
Yeah, there's no difference.
I mean, yeah.
You're like, don't shoot them. They might be carrying fawns. It's like, well,
if you kill them early, they're definitely not gonna carry fawns.
Yeah, like
so it's just all those habitat managers that are like really good. Most of them are talking about, if you're trying to enhance rut this year, you need to kill them early in the season. If you really don't care, like if you can't kill them early, it's fine. But like when gun season comes in, like I don't know in Oklahoma how many does you can kill in the state, and I don't know if it's specified for like different seasons, gun, muzzleloader, and archery. But if you have to wait till gun season, you shoot them kind of late November, December time frame, whatever. Just kind of get ahead of them. So that's something Anthony tried to do at the farm this year. I think he said he killed 8, or they killed 8 total down the farm, 8 does. And he still had, even at the end of the season, they still had trail cam photos of 12 does on camera at a time.
Yeah. Well, I think that's that. So just knowing people like kind of in different parts of the state, like whether it be Anthony or I think Tommy's like this too, wanting to kill a whole bunch of does. I usually hear people, it's like at the end of season, they're like, oh, we need to do like a doe rodeo. Like we got to get some people out here to shoot some does. And they're always, most of them that I've talked to, like they never have killed enough does, as they put it. And so that's probably, I guess it makes more sense. Like it depends on how many you're wanting to take off the property. Like if you're wanting to kill like 25 does, you better start early, because it's going to be hard to do by the end of season, right? And if you wait till you have like 2-3 weekends left in the season, it's going to be very, very hard to hit that goal, like whatever your goal is. So I don't know. I guess that would be my advice on it. I'm not a professional deer manager or anything, but that's just taking it from people who I know who either manage their own property or who manage other people's property. Like I hear that all the time. They're wanting to kill more does, and they just don't have enough manpower to do it, basically.
Yeah, it makes it tough. You wait till the last. And then also, if you wait until late season, especially those does are kind of educated, it's not like you might not just have success sitting on a food plot or something and trying to kill them. Because like most people I talk to that like try to shoot does, they'll go to they'll have certain food plots set up that is almost strategically placed to shoot does off of. Like they're not really worried about shooting a buck off a specific food plot. But you wait in the late season, especially when all leaves come down and everything, those deer could shift, and like you might actually struggle to find them. So, I mean, it's just one of those things, like, I think the earlier you can do it, the better. And again, like Alan Summerford always talks about, if the conditions aren't great to go after like one of his target bucks, well, we're going to go shoot does.
Yep.
If it's gun season, I'm taking the kids, and we're going to go try to shoot 2 or 3 does on a food plot, on a different side of the property from like where I'm trying to hunt those bucks at.
Yep, definitely. All right, let's get to these Apple Podcast reviews. As promised, we're going to read through these, and we're going to pick our favorite one, send you a Blaze Orange hat and a sticker pack. So we got a bunch of these jokers to go through. I'll start with the first one. This is from Sean Jackson. He said, podcast 5 stars. Recently found you guys and have really enjoyed your turkey episodes. My favorite so far was Mr. Joe Ham and Coach Waters. Joe's a friend of mine and always love hearing him tell a story. Keep up the good work. Appreciate it, Sean. Those are 2 of our most popular turkey episodes probably ever.
Where is that at?
You got to go way back. We got a whole bunch of them. That one was from May 3rd.
Oh, okay, gotcha. All right, so yeah, the next one. This is a 5-star review. 10 out of 10 recommend from Artemis, the wrong target. Very interesting. User handle. This podcast is the best hunting podcast. Andrew and Jacob always ask their guests the best questions for their listeners. The amount of information I've learned from this podcast is immeasurable. I'm a new hunter with just 3 whole seasons under my belt. My husband is an avid hunter, and he has even started asking me hunting questions because he knows I've listened to 500 plus episodes of the Southern Outdoorsman.
All right.
Holy cow.
All right.
Wow. No one ever took me out in the woods and showed me how to deer hunt. In fact, I never owned a gun until 2020. I knew I had the underhand because I haven't ever had a mentor. Woodsmanship is definitely learned with boots on the ground, but let me tell you, that is not the only way to learn. I've used this podcast as a tool, and when I go into the woods, I use and apply so much that I've heard on the show, and I have had some big listener success stories. So much so that our hunting camp has had a couple guys with quote unquote a problem with me hunting. And then in quotes here, I'm the only female hunter there. Keep up the good work. I'm looking forward to another season and making some of those guys mad again.
All right.
That's hilarious.
That's awesome.
We heard that from, actually,
I wonder if that's her.
that is a good question. I don't know.
Is that interesting? All right. This next one is from Bowhunter1717. 5 stars. I have been a listener for 4 or 5 years. I pressure wash for a living, and I wear ear pods while I'm at work. I'm always happy when a new podcast drops so I can learn while I work. Coach Waters' podcast was so good, I was rewinding things he said just to hear him twice. I used the quote-unquote death call and scratching leaves and had 2 gobblers on a string coming in last weekend. I was using decoys for my son, and sadly the decoys spooked the birds. I have a love-hate relationship with decoys. I met Jacob at the NWTF convention, and he was just as nice in person as he seems on the podcast. You guys should do a podcast listener hunt with the Southern Outdoorsman. Thanks for all the great podcasts, and please keep them coming. Man, it would be kind of fun to do like a little camp with like some listeners. I don't know how we'd structure that, but we could not do that on public land. We actually have gotten that quite a few times where people are like, hey, let's do a Southern Outdoorsman camp at so-and-so WMA. I'm like, I don't think you want that on that WMA, dude.
Nope.
Like, that'd be a lot of people showing up. So, anyways, if anyone's got some like jam up private land where they'd be willing to host some people,
Do a doe shoot.
let's do a Southern Outdoorsman doe rodeo.
If you got some acreage and you need 10, 15, 20 doe shot, okay,
let's go.
or more, we'll do it. Yeah, Southern Outdoorsman
I'm your
doe
Huckleberry.
rodeo.
Yeah. Okay.
That'd be fun.
I like that.
All right. Next one, 5 stars, titled Episode 580 by Thunder Mountain 88. Thank you guys for putting this episode out about hunting terminology and showing examples of what those terms mean. If there is a way to pin this to the top of Apple Podcasts, then make it happen. It would be a great catch-em episode for the new listeners to see at the top. Let me restart that.
You can do it.
It would be a great catch-em episode for new listeners to see at the very top of the list. I struggled with that little sentence right there. Anyway, appreciate that, Thunder Mountain.
All right. This is from Jordan_648. Poster child, 5 stars. I've had a lot of success, and others around me have had a lot of success from things I've learned right here on this show. Best 2 things I've ever done were start hunting public land and start listening to the show. My success proves this show's worth. Tracy Brooks, your boy.
Yep.
Hey, we ought to have Tracy on for real. We had him on episode 500, actually.
Yeah.
For a segment, we were doing listener segments. But maybe we ought to have like a whole episode. He's got a listener success story coming up on Facebook. Dang, I just did what you did with the word success.
Can you say it again? Say it 6 times.
Success. He's got one coming up on our Facebook. So they went. He didn't name the state. Look, Tracy already knows what's up. He didn't. I have a whole field where you put the state in. It's a required field. You have to put what state you killed it. You know, when you fill out the form, and he put like
NA
state or something. Like he did not name it. And I'm like, Tracy knows. He knows what's up. Anyways, next up.
All right, so this next one, 5-star review titled Best Southern Hunting Podcast from GA Sportsman 98. Hands down, one of the best hunting podcasts out there. I absolutely love the in-depth strategy talk as well as the storytelling aspect of some episodes that make me feel like I was in hunting camp with y'all. I found you guys through Jacob's episode with Bo Martonic on the East Meets West podcast episode talking about thermals and have been a consistent listener ever since. I recently moved to Georgia from New England last fall and used some of the tactics on the show, specifically compounding features and habitat types, to fill the freezer with 5 fat does, 5 fat old freezer queens. I should have said that does.
No, freezer queens. Let's go.
As well as getting some historical data for larger bucks this year on public. Keep up the great work, fellas.
Nice. All right, this one is from Squirrel Skinner.
Really,
all right, you're
great title here.
You're getting some points for the name and title. Squirrely Dan, 5 stars. Great episode, guys. Nice refresher, even for guys who are familiar with the terms. Just a quick note on creek shoals. Deer aren't the only species that use them. Back in November, while deer hunting near a shoal that bucks regularly use while cruising during the rut, I watched a group of 9 hen turkeys use the same shoal to cross. About a month ago, I watched a gobbler use that same shoal to cross the creek looking for what he thought was a fired-up hen, only to find a load of steel shot. Keep up the good work. All right, I'm digging that one.
Dude, old Squirrel Skinner. You're using steel shot?
Were you hunting like a
natural
refuge?
Refuge? I mean, Tonks. I mean, I guess you don't want to play TSS price. I get it.
I killed my first. Well, no, it wasn't steel shot. It was a copper-plated lead.
Yeah, that's definitely not a steel shot.
No,
it could identify a steel shot.
You get in trouble if you duck hunt with that.
You take a Sharpie to that shell, like steel shot number 6s. Anyway. All right, next one. Best hunting podcast out there from VA Mike 99, 5 stars. Y'all find the best guests to interview and pick their brains for the benefit of all of us listening. You guys got them all from Barry Wenzel, Dan Infault to folks I've never heard of, but you are so knowledgeable and helpful to listen to, like Coach Waters, Jacob Schmidt, and Glenn Solomon, RIP. Y'all keep it up, and thank you both for putting out such good content. Thanks, Mike.
Man, he threw it way back with the Jacob Schmidt. You know what episode number that was?
Like 2?
2.
Yeah.
Episode 2. For everyone who's about to go back and re-listen to that, I hereby apologize for the audio quality.
I'm trying to get him back on the podcast. I talked to him back in, I think, January.
He's still laying them down?
I think, yeah. He's been busy. I think he's got kids and everything. He, stopped his YouTube stuff. Because we knew about Jacob Schmidt from his YouTube channel. Man, he has got video breakdowns, aerial video breakdowns using
from
Google
back
Earth.
in the day.
Yeah, like 2009, 2010. That's got hundreds of thousands of views.
Yeah.
Or he's breaking down how deer using habitat edges and terrain features and everything. It is really, really good stuff. I mean, he was one of the first guys I saw, at least from the deep south, that was doing that because he's from Arkansas.
Yeah, he did one years ago. It was the first time I ever saw anyone in a video break down pines and hardwoods on a satellite image. And that's before I really knew anything about that. That's how long ago it was.
Yeah.
And I've always been a map nerd, and it was still, he was some of the first videos that I saw that kind of showed me that. And so basically, right when we started the podcast, I'm like, oh, we got to get this guy on. And we got him on. It was pretty cool. So, all right, this is the last one. Woo, long one from our buddy Kyle Huffstutler, man. Old Kyle, he's legit. Known Kyle for years now. Fun fact: Kyle was at Auburn with me at School of Forestry when we started the podcast, and dude, he's been listening since like day one. It's pretty cool. All right, Covert Colin, 5 stars. I want to start this off by saying excellent job with the turkey content and guests this season. I learned a lot, especially from Mr. Waters' episode. I've been turkey hunting for 5 years. However, this is the first year I got fired up about it, and I was eager to learn all that I could. Listening to multiple different episodes and in the woods, trial and error this year taught me a lot. I was able to kill 2 public land birds this year, as well as hunting with a couple of extremely talented hunters that taught me a lot. But the things that they taught me didn't really click until Mr. Waters' episode. Before, I was always calling to make him gobble. It's true. It's a hard habit to break, but once you see the difference it makes, it is a no-brainer to back off the call or throw it out of reach. While hunting with 3 different very successful hunters this year, I was like a sponge watching how they called, watching the setups, etc. One thing I noticed was how soft they called once getting set up. Before, if the bird went silent, I would get hot on the call and just beg him to gobble. While this worked sometimes, it certainly didn't work all the time. After listening to this episode of Mr. Waters, it made a lot of sense to me, and I reflected back to both birds I'd killed this year on how little and soft I called to them versus the other birds that I should have killed and how loud and often I called at them. I was very fortunate to get to watch several hens within 30 yards of me this year, and that alone taught me a lot as well. There was only one hen in particular that I got right up under this year and yelped and purred for about 45 minutes before pitching down. Once she hit the ground, she yelped for an hour straight. Had I not saw her before, I would have been cussing the hunter that was not putting the call down. She was within 65 yards of me the whole time. I could barely hear her yelping. However, the gobbler that was several hundred yards away definitely heard her the entire time based off how often he was gobbling and cutting her off. Again, guys, excellent job, and keep up the content. Deer season starts now. Appreciate that, Kyle. That was an awesome review, dude. I didn't know that Kyle wasn't into turkey hunting until now. Interesting. All right. What's the verdict?
I say Artemis or whatever.
Okay.
Just because I want to see some pissed off dudes in the hunting club see that Southern Outdoorsman hat. Hammers a big old buck.
All right. If that was your review, reach out to us. I think we might know who you are already because I think we met you at Eco Wild. But reach out. We'll get you an orange hat in the mail. Appreciate everybody else who left reviews. I'll tell you what. If y'all read off some of those other reviews, let's see. Like, who are these other ones? So, like, let's see. The first one, I can't read your handle. Your handle is gibberish. So, let's see. Bowhunter 1717, Thunder Mountain 88, Jordan 648, GA Sportsman 98, Squirrel Skinner, VA Mike 99, and Kyle Huffstutler. Y'all hit us up too. We'll send y'all some stickers.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
Everybody gets a sticker, but Artemis, you get the Lucky Blaze orange hat. So again, appreciate everybody for leaving those reviews. That's a big help to us on Apple Podcasts. YouTube comments, big help to us.
How should they reach out to us, by the way? Email or what?
Yeah, email us. Go to thesouthernoutdoorsman.com. We got a contact page over there, so fill out that contact form and we'll get back with y'all.
Yep, perfect. Yeah. The reviews help out a ton. Plus, it's nice getting good feedback, or just getting feedback in general about the show and kind of what y'all are liking about it, and then maybe other stuff y'all want to see coming out even more so. So, appreciate all that. Appreciate everybody leaving us Q&As again for these Thursday sessions on the podcast. Really like kind of going through some of these questions. And then other than that, Andrew, got anything else?
I think that's all I got.
All right, perfect. Awesome. Well, thank y'all for watching the podcast. Thank you for listening to the podcast, and we'll catch you back here on Monday's episode. You're not going to want to miss Monday's episode. I'm going to tell you right now. It's a banger. But we'll catch you back on Monday's episode of the Southern Outdoorsman podcast. And remember, y'all stay Southern.